Good afternoon and welcome to the Nacogdoches County, City of Nacogdoches Council work session. Kathleen, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Happy to. Dear Lord, first of all, thank you so much for all the many gifts that you shower upon us for our life and liberty, our ability to pursue happiness, for our independence, particularly as we continue to celebrate our country's 250th birthday. We ask you to continue to guide us, to continue to let your light shine upon us every day, every night. We ask you to keep us safe and keep us independent. And today in particular, we ask that you bless our city, our state, and our nation, and please give us wisdom. We ask all of these things in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
If you'll stand for the pledges, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, we're here this afternoon for a work session. Items are intended to provide opportunities for the City Council to study and discuss various issues and gather and analyze information. Council will not take any formal action on matters presented at a work session, but may direct staff to place items on future agendas for formal presentation. And I'd like to add, this is going to be a lengthy presentation. You may have questions for clarification of a chart or something like that, but I don't want to get into the weeds if you just write them down, and then I don't want Todd to run out of time on this presentation. It has to be presented first, and then just write your questions down. If you have any points of clarification, he'll be glad to do that. And then we've had this for almost a week, and everybody should have reviewed it. And anyway, there'll be more than enough opportunity between now and the time that, as we go forward, to ask questions about their presentation. Okay, Todd, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, Council. Again, my name's Todd Semino, Interim Finance Director for the city. Welcome to the first budget workshop for the year. Before we get into the numbers, the city manager usually likes to discuss the priorities and challenges of the city for the upcoming budget year, so I'll hand it over to the city manager for that.
And I'll try to keep my comedy to brevity as I run through this for y'all's sake. You know, as we've mentioned at the outset of our last couple of budget cycles, that what we've really been trying to do, since we're really on a linear pathway, it includes forecasting, it includes our capital CIP items and our bond items, and it's, at the end of the day, trying to make the city as best as it can be, as good as it can be, with financial prudence, but also not a nickel and dime approach, because again, we have old infrastructure. We've got, we're trying to address retention, quality, not just quantity. And some of these bullet points are kind of overarching goals in each of the budgets, especially with what the priorities have been ever since the original vote on the bonds. And the others have been developed in prior budgets, and some of these priorities are also continuations in the following budgets. And with that, we also have been trying to focus on try to build into each budget really a forecast. So what your spend rate is, what you're improving, and how you move into that, and what you're going to look like going into subsequent budgets. So I won't just hammer all these out, but continuing on employee retention, benefits, and I think morale, although I think some folks in here don't think I'm that funny. Continued recruitment and retention of police, and sorry, fire, Todd called you other first responders, but We still love you. Focus on the critical use of both general fund and utility fund CIP projects, meaning we want to be able to execute them, try to have them on time and within budget, also knowing we've got some other factors in the world that affect things, kind of like COVID, that have kind of reared its head now with some of the world events. Hopefully that's stabilizing, it looks like. Coordinating with both TxDOT and Stephen F. Austin as our largest state partners, one of which has most of the surface streets that run through town, most of the major thoroughfares, whether it's North, University, Appleby Sand, and the other being our major employer, Stephen F. Austin, to address the growth that's coming. We will get into some of those other things like the comp plan that's coming as a priority, as well as the North Street plan, which will roll into other capital improvements and pursuit of grants. We're always going to pursue primary jobs and commerce, because at the end of the day, people got to eat, and you don't have a robust town, and you can't grow or even have steady growth, stable growth, kind of like a Fortune 500 company, not a tech company, but one of the ones that is stable and steady over a 100-year type term, or in our case, 300. We want to leverage best we can and utilize city assets. So that might be leveraging a piece of property. It doesn't mean we're going to go fire sale properties. No, again, no, not picking on fire. But it does mean if we have an opportunity to put it at highest and best use, instead of have it be fallow, that we're going to explore those opportunities. We do need to maintain our reserve requirements. Todd will get into the charter and the minimum reserve requirements and the state requirements we have, but generally making sure we have at least the 25% reserve requirement. We completed the downtown implementation plan, and we have a couple of next steps. One of which is we've had discussions on the garage that Elliott has in design. Some next steps on Festival Park, which include analysis of demand for even a event venue. That RFP has already been put out on the street, and we've had some responses. We'll be bringing that to you in the near future to select a consulting team. That'll be hotel motel funded. A housing workshop gap analysis, or actually, just as says, what it should say is really a housing gap analysis. We would hold a workshop on it, and maybe a couple meetings, maybe two. What we really need to do on that front is, we're not in the business of building single-family homes or multifamily homes. We do have latent demand, and it's hitting rather fast with SFA. So there's lagging data. We need to help tell that story in such a way that we can try to encourage, that doesn't mean with money, but supply and demand, the private sector to come deliver what's needed here. Because again, we don't have a funded type B. We really don't have a vehicle to address some of the things for market housing, whether it's for new professors coming in or additional student housing off campus. And keep in mind, with everything that's built on campus, there is no property tax. So the UT system can spend $1 billion on campus, and at the end of the day, what we have to then do is respond and try to plan around that to just address traffic, additional first responders, and all of the things that come with several thousand more people in town. So I do want to kind of drive that part home. We'll talk about where we are planning out to 2030. I know you've heard me talk about inflationary issues, geopolitical things all over the world that can affect everything from inflation to supply chain to our fuel costs. That's what happened this year. We also have the healthcare item, which is never going to go down in the grand scheme of things. Everything becomes more expensive. We do have replacement costs we'll just talk about on the firefighting apparatus, meaning vehicle. They always like to use that fancy word. And also in this next legislative session, talking about what the focus is on property tax, knowing that the last session resulted in us entering this year, or going into this budget with actually less property tax value than last year, just with that legislative tweak. So I think I've yielded my time to the guy in the blue shirt.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. So next, before we talk about the FY '27 budget numbers, we'll just quickly recap our current year projections. Council, as you know, you get a monthly financial packet every month to update you on this, so this should be no surprise. But right now, the general fund, utility fund, and the sanitation fund are all coming in under budget. That's a good thing. That means we're not spending our entire budget. As you can see, the airport FBO is going over budget. The general fund usually has to help subsidize that operation, even though it's an enterprise fund. We're looking at ways to help shore that up, but also the Halton, or the temporary Halton operations this summer is contributing to us going over budget in this fund as well. So we'll look at sales tax. As you can see, for this year that we're in, we have $8.7 million budgeted. We're forecasting a little over $9 million to be received, so that's good news for us. I kind of look back more years than what's on this chart, but basically, need to point out something real quick. In February of 2025, that's your December sales. That's when we had that $265,000 audit adjustment. So what looks like a rapid growth between 24 and 25 to 25 and 26 isn't really that rapid of a growth, because if you would have put another $256,000 into that February sale because of that audit adjustment where they took the money away from us, it kind of skews our numbers. But looking back 3 years, we're averaging 2% growth a year. Obviously, sales tax is important to the city because it's the second largest source of revenue to the general fund, accounting for at least 26% of the general fund's revenue. Property tax is obviously one of the most important revenues of the general fund. It accounts for 36% of the revenue of the general fund. And what I'd like to point out is that our valuations between tax year 26 and 27 went down for one of the first times, over $119 million. Now, we know $50 million is because of that new exemption the legislator gave businesses for their personal property tax exemption. So that accounts for $50 million, but it dropped $119 million, so that's a concern. We haven't got the certified rolls yet. They'll come out July 25th. I can't imagine why values are going down, so my hunch is maybe there's more property being contested with the appraisal review board than normal. So when we get that information at the end of this month, we can give you an update on that.
And Todd, on that one, where we also have some cause for concern, we don't think that the cost of the dirt's going down. We think, obviously, we don't think the cost of construction's going down. So we do have the concern because, yes, there hasn't been a lot of comps on new construction you could be looking at, or even a lot of sales, because we have a little bit tighter market still than, compared to Lufkin, as an example. But we have had commercial activity. We have had think about it. You've had a couple things pop up on North. You've had some conversion of properties. You got the Tractor Supply thing. You've got the conversion of the from Big Lots to Aldi. So we do want to make sure that effectively we're not getting shorted in the grand scheme of things. We really shouldn't be going through that kind of additional contraction because we have activity. If we didn't have activity, we'd understand it.
And also, I just want to, this is a good foreshadowing of what our tax rate is going to do. So simply because the values dropped, that puts upward pressure on your no new revenue tax rate. If values hold the same, which they didn't, then your no new revenue rate doesn't change. If values go up, automatically your no new revenue rate drops. It's an inverse relationship. So Since the values are dropping, it automatically puts upward pressure on your tax rate just to receive the same amount of revenue next year that you did this year. And as usual, I'm always gonna recommend the voter approval rate, which is that no new revenue rate plus 3.5%. Again, I don't have the certified values, but my estimation, in order to get our 3.5% of revenue growth, that's probably gonna be 1.9 to 2 pennies added to the tax rate. For the citizens of Nacogdoches, just know every penny on a $100,000 house adds $10 to your property tax. So if you have a $200,000 house, 2 pennies is gonna add $20 a year to your property tax. This is just a historical CPI and just backward-looking information on historical raises for employees. You can see on the right-hand side, 4.2 is our current inflation index. So it's going up, as the city manager alluded to earlier. Good news here is our turnover ratio has been dropping through the years. Another foreshadowing indicator is this note in the upper left-hand corner: 25% of our employees are eligible to retire. Why is that important? That puts pressure on your turnover rate coming in the future. Also, with turnover, just about anyone will tell you, turnover in your upper management to executive class, that always tests the market, which means usually you're gonna have to pay a higher salary to replace that person. Your rank and file and even your police and fire are more structured. They have steps they automatically fall into, so it doesn't really impact them. But if you have a lot of management level, supervisor level, executive level, that's in this 25%, that's gonna put upward pressure on your salary.
And I would just also go back to your 23 timeframe, you know, when we were heading into that early part of the fiscal year. I know I arrived in November, but we were dealing with the residual of that, where you had a lot of payouts from, you know, your time off. You had long tenured employees, and as those folks retired, I know PD also had several people. I think in PD we were up to maybe 25% vacancies, and now we've got it way, way down. And wanted to thank them again. But that actually cost you more. I hate to say it. And then the folks you backfill with them, especially director level, if you start bleeding directors at some point, typically you're not going to find those in any city. You're typically going to have to go somewhere else. You may elevate people, and that may take care of even half of them. But it also depends on how, I hate to use the word, how seasoned those folks have that you have at some of those mid-levels. Are they ready to step up into that? And I think we've even seen that. I mean, I can name a few departments that if it was on the job training, we would have had trouble. Instead, we've actually been able to smooth things out, and obviously finance has done outstanding. But it was an effort to get folks here. I mean, in this case, I'll pick on Todd and I'll pick on Kevin. We had to go get them from elsewhere to find someone with prior government accounting and government budgeting background at the local level.
Okay, so let's look at some preliminary budget summaries. Included in the summaries that you're going to see is a 2% increase for salaries. You can see the fiscal impact for each of the funds that actually have employees in this slide here. Just an interesting note, the city in this budget has a total of 346 full-time employees that are budgeted. 76% of those employees are in the general fund. Also included in this preliminary budget illustration is newly funded positions for the police department. They come at a cost of $88,000 each. That's fully burdened, so what that means it includes TMRS, payroll tax, and insurance. I believe the base starting out pay is
And-
like $61,800.
And I'm going to channel the ghost of Scott Williams here. I know we've never been full to that point to have that many. I know we can have this, frozen, unfrozen, but I think we're at the point where if these are funded positions moving forward, we're very close to being able to have, what is that, 60, what's the total number, 63 sworn? 65. And I know that's a goal before. There's Ghost again, talking at me. I hear chains rattling. Those are handcuffs. But I think we're very close. I think morale is definitely heading in the right direction, and that's why these are the only, pardon me, Scott, new FTEs that we have in this budget.
Okay, so let's take a look at how the general fund is shaping up. So in here, I have a scenario A and a scenario B illustration. All the assumptions for these scenarios are listed to the left here. The only difference between A and B is that B does not include a property tax rate increase. So the assumptions are, for A, 3.5% property tax rate increase. We still have some leftover ARPA money that we're earning interest on, so we're gonna transfer that $150,000 into the general fund. I told you already that we're averaging 2% growth on sales tax per year. In the budget world, we like to be conservative, so I'm only budgeting a 1.75% sales tax increase. And then we're looking at all of our contracts. We found some money in the contract with the county for dispatch, which basically had a rate table that we charge dispatch, or that includes dispatch officers that we charge the county. And also in the contract, it says that we're entitled to get reimbursed for overtime. It hasn't been done in the past, so it's good that we're learning every year. We're analyzing contracts in deeper detail, so we were able to find maybe a couple $100,000 in that contract that we haven't billed before, that we put them on notice and let them know we're gonna start following that contract.
And that's a decade-old piece of paper?
At least, yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't being utilized that way.
And then on the expense side, basically, what was requested plus a 2% increase in payroll. So in scenario A, you can see towards the bottom, our excess over the reserve, that's the 25% that we're talking about. So we're complying with that policy, and then the city charter mandates you gotta have more operating revenue than operating expenditures, so we're meeting that. We're also meeting that in scenario B, and that's for fiscal year 2027. If we move forward to 2028, it's the same assumptions, except we're having to make a few more on the expense side since we haven't had any requests yet. So we're assuming a 3% operational cost increase, which is under the 4.2% CPI now. Another 2% increase for payroll. CIP plus capital. The last couple of years, the average for a capital request, that's fleet, vehicles, tractors, equipment, it's been an average of $850,000 a year. So that's why that number's there, plus what's in the CIP plan. Our CIP plan goes out 5 years, so we knew which number to plug in there. So again, scenario A, we have an operating income, charter requirement met, policy met. Same thing in scenario B, which is no tax rate increase. If we move out to 2029, the good news is last year when we were talking about this, we were not meeting our reserve requirement nor our operational income requirement, but we are now. And it's because of things that you'll see later. We've reshuffled some things in our CIP plan, basically delayed them. We're giving increases under CPI, and there's some other things that are gonna impact us later. But the good news is that We're still fully funded through 2029. So you might ask then, well, why do we need a tax rate increase? So some of the things we haven't talked about yet that we will, healthcare costs, which were mentioned in the priorities and challenges. In our healthcare fund, this year, we're probably gonna have a loss of somewhere between $700,000 to $900,000. So that has to be covered somewhere. And we're working with we just onboarded a new health consultant, so we're working through those numbers, trying to get an idea of what's going on. You have high claimants every odd year. So we'll get with our health consultants, we'll try to smooth that out. Obviously, this was a year of high claimants, along with, increased healthcare cost in general. So we're gonna meet with them probably later this month, early August, and have a plan to address that shortfall, because we can't continue to have obviously a $700,000 to $900,000 loss in our healthcare funds.
And let me add, Todd, that if y'all remember, we go back to 24, I think. We also had the highest reserves. We didn't have that many claims. We had the highest reserves we had ever had. So having been down this road before, there's gonna be years you have, it's Murphy's Law. It's gonna happen. Unfortunately, it all happens at once. It doesn't mean it's gonna happen like that every year. We're gonna look at what the options are. I would point out, though, if we do look at how we backfill that, make sure that the fund is healthy, especially your folks on the, it'll affect everybody. Healthcare costs are going up, period. But we're coming in even with a recommendation on raises at half of what CPI is. So what we don't want to do, when we have morale about where it needs to be, retention about where it needs to be, we don't want to overreact because you get a sample of 1 year and say, oh, we need to raise everything. I also remember when we had that largest reserve, there were certain parties saying, oh, we need to go ahead and raise the contribution on the employee, which didn't make any sense at all. So it's something we're watching. I don't think it's cause for alarm. These years happen. You will get a couple big claims. That's, again, if you look at our census and the number of people, and that also means probably them and possibly their spouse that are eligible to retire, that a lot of that kind of answers itself. But that's also why we've got good, seasoned, experienced people on board, and we're able to handle more projects right now than at any point in the city's history. So just adding that, we don't want to overcorrect on it one way or the other. Because if you have a trend of 3 years, that's a trend. If it's a sample of one, it's a sample of one.
Right, and thank goodness, like city manager said, we have good fund balance in that self-insurance fund. And council, you can look at the monthly packet that we give you every month. You can see those numbers in more detail if you want to. So again, why are we gonna suggest a property tax rate increase? Number one, the healthcare costs I just talked about. Number two, fire engine replacement. We'll have a slide on that here that I'll walk over with you. Again, we're only giving our employees a 2% raise when inflation's double that. Like to work on that on future budgets. 25% of our workforce, as I mentioned, is eligible to retire. That's going to increase turnover, drag out pay, higher salaries. We have an unknown future with the current legislator in Texas on what they want to do with property tax. Just maybe 5 years ago, we could increase property taxes 8.5%. Now it's 3.5%. They wanted to lower it to 2.5%. The governor even wants to get rid of it. So you're gonna have to incorporate a different tax or double the sales tax. So who knows how the Texas legislature is gonna handle that. So we wanna get what we can to secure our position when we can. And again, we're deferring CIP to later years just to try to preserve our reserves. And we'll have a slide on that later also.
And for the taxpayers, which includes just about everybody in this room and everybody on the screen, I'd say that if you go back before the tax cap it was even out there, like Todd mentioned, there wasn't a sense of urgency that every session you might have just your base that you had the year before, if you did nothing, whittled away. And I think that that is, not that it's some ominous specter, but I think it is at least a consideration as y'all look at that. And I'm not saying that the answer is the full amount, but if we're being honest with ourselves, yes, we're starting with less going into this year, and some of our costs have went up. So I would just simply look at it like that, and then, I mean, again, like many things, maybe the answer's somewhere in the middle. We don't want to overcorrect, but we don't want to undercorrect either. Can you just explain, if we keep it at the base where we're at, as an example, and then they tweak it, let's say another exemption gets thrown in, effectively, we're then competing with ourselves again to just get back to where we were, which we can't even at that point without going to the voters, correct?
That's correct.
So there is a danger if you ratchet it back too far, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If the legislature tweaks the exemption, as an example, by about the same amount, you would then struggle, you'd have to go to the voters to just get back to where you were maybe 3 years ago. That would be the concern.
Okay, here's the slide on basically the fire engine replacement plan. I'll just point out, the chief really wanted 2 fire engines in 2027. This second one, we asked him to delay it until 2028. So, but if you look at the replacement through 2044, $22 million between now and then. It'd be nice if we could set $1.3 million aside each year to fund this, to where we're not, I know in the past y'all have done tax notes to fund fire engines. This year we did a lease purchase. Lease purchase, that's interest. So if we're gonna lease purchase all these because we don't have sufficient cash, that's gonna be a lot of interest on this 22 million. And then look towards the later years. I know this is over a decade away, but you got a lot of money that's gonna hit in 12, 13 years from now that we need to start planning for now. So what are we doing to help alleviate some of this burden? So on the revenue side, you can see last year we had a utility rate study. We completed that. We had a sanitation rate study. We completed that. I think later tonight, Kevin will show y'all how these hotel motel revenue audits, franchise fee and sales tax audits could recover revenues for the city. I think last month, council just approved a contract for the utility revenue billing audit. We found some money in this contract that's been overlooked in the past. Again, the longer we're here, the more we're learning, the more, because of the turnover, the more we're learning, the more we're gonna try to get out of our revenue optimization anyway. Utilization of grants and a grant management platform. We still gotta do a review of permit fees, so hopefully all these things can take some pressure off of our budget. So what are we doing on the expense side? That first one's been in process for a while now. It's a little trickier than what we thought, but passing on the convenient fees that credit card companies charge the city currently to the user, which is pretty standard these days. That could save up to $300,000 a year. Most of it's in the water fund, but it could save up to $300,000 a year. We have a pilot program on GPS on our fleet vehicles. We did it in our enterprise funds first because they have more money in the general fund. So how does that help? It helps us track our maintenance. It helps us track where our vehicles are, how they're used, making sure everything's being used properly. and our maintenance is being taken care of properly. We recently updated our procurement policy and all the related internal controls to that, so we put better controls on technology purposes, fleet vehicles, P-card controls. So all these things are streamlined now, so it's more uniform and there's a lot more control over what's being purchased in technology and fleet and on our P-cards. This enterprise fleet management, I think is gonna be a great tool for the city. We're in discussions with the vendor right now. We plan on having a presentation for the council, hopefully early August. But basically, instead of cash funding all of our vehicles, the goal here is to lease them. We've all heard of Enterprise Rental Car, that's the actual company. So what we do is we use our purchasing discount that we get as a government to buy vehicles cheap. We lease them through Enterprise for 5 years at a time, and then the best value, we use Enterprise to auction those vehicles off in their worldwide auction instead of our local auction, which brings pennies to the dollar on vehicles. So we don't want to wait till a vehicle is 15 to 20 years old before we sell it and get scraps, because that whole time, your gas mileage is going down, your maintenance is going up. So it'll be a way to keep our fleet modern, up to date, more economical, but the big bang for the buck is gonna have them sell our cars for us in their auctions. And so we're gonna show you the math on that.
Well, it's that plus the, really the maintenance cost piece, because I know everybody here really likes an old, like 15-year-old Tahoe. But there is a point in there when you're maintaining, let's say, 3 throwdown Tahoes that are well beyond their useful life. They've cycled out of PD. They move into code enforcement. Next thing you know, we're leaving them at the airport as courtesy cars. It could be that we have even, and then part of this analysis will also probably help drive home, do we have the right fleet mix? Could we, in some cases, have gotten rid of some of those vehicles? Did we really need 2 vehicles instead of those 3? Are we keeping things around kind of like a junkyard just because we have it and just because it's already paid for? And so we would like to, and it may be that the answer, just like the answer on the tax rate, may not be 0 or 2 cents. The answer might even be an incremental approach where some of the things we continue to own and we implement this over a period of time, and there's certain areas where they're low-hanging fruit where we can immediately have some cost savings, and it just makes sense. And there's other areas where it may not make complete sense now, but we might roll to it in subsequent years.
Right, and we've had discussions with Enterprise Fleet Management along with most of the directors, and they're helping out so much just by like, hey, instead of a 250, can you use a 150? Okay, great. Well, instead of this specific vehicle, can you use a hybrid? And then actually some of the people were like, yeah, I could actually use a hybrid. And it's like, and they're good on like, well, you don't want to buy this certain type of vehicle because the resale is not going to be there for you. If I can switch you to this vehicle, the resale is going to be a lot more and it's going to be more beneficial for the city. So they're really great on giving those kind of tips. Again, we'll workshop it with the council and give you all the information at that time. Another thing we're doing is a technology gap analysis. We've talked to the council about charging event-related overtime to the hot fund instead of to the funds where the employees are. And then, we're gonna look at shared cost contracts with the county. So, a little disclaimer on the bottom right there is what that means. So we're doing things on the revenue side and the expense side to help relieve the burden of the budget. What this slide is, I wanted to show the council how good I think the directors get on their budget request this year. If you don't see a department up here, that means they didn't request more than 3% increase of budget compared to last year, even though inflation's 4.2. So if the only people that asked for more than 3% of their operating budget than last year is on this slide. And here, operating expenditures excludes wages and benefits, because they don't really have any control over wages and benefits other than overtime. So on those, I'll just give you a quick recap on the overages here for these areas. So on the city secretary, their budget went up because possible to have 2 elections instead of 1. Technology went up because of Laserfish, Smart Sheets, Google Workspace, and licensing requirements. Again, y'all can ask questions if you want to at the end of the presentation. I'm just trying to give you the overview. The non-departmental went up. That's where we basically pay for all of our liability insurance and utilities. Obviously, those costs are increasing, along with our CAD fees. The police department's budget went up because of vehicle supplies, gas and maintenance, IT maintenance, communication services, training, and special services.
And proportionate to their budget, I realize you've got that 3% variance as a baseline, but proportionate to their budget, that's not a huge budget delta.
Right. Fire's budget went up for small tools, safety clothing, and vehicle maintenance, but the majority of their budget went up because we actually started budgeting deployment costs that are reimbursed by TIFMAS. But on the other side of the equation, since we're budgeting deployment costs, we also budgeted the revenue that's gonna cover that. Okay, on parks and cemeteries, that went up because of a contract for portable restrooms, which should go away, and cemetery software. Streets went up because of equipment and equipment maintenance. And then the transfers went up because, like I said earlier, we're having to increase our transfer to the FBO, to the airport, to subsidize their operations, and also to the airport construction fund. This is the utility fund. The assumptions here, the rate study included a 5.4% increase in water and sewer rates. For the citizens, that's going to equate to an extra $2.65 roughly on their water bill for an average use of 4,000 gallons per month. We're meeting the city charter requirements by the operating surplus income, and we're meeting our policy of the reserve requirement. The sanitation fund, the notes for the revenue are on the side. We're increasing basically trash pickup by 77 cents per month. There's also a 5% increase on disposal rates. Again, we're meeting charter requirements on operating income and reserves. I need a hydration break. FIFA. Capital improvement plan. These are basically the burn ratios by category. It's basically telling you how much of the current year budget that we're expending on those categories. There's like 20 slides here on the CIP. I'm gonna breeze through them real quick. Just maybe hit a few highlights because I do want y'all to have time for questions. So on the general fund, as you can see, there's hardly anything planned for the next 5 years because we're deferring it all in an effort to preserve our reserves or borrow money to fund those projects. This is the parks part of the general fund. Oh, and also for the citizens, don't forget there's a legend on the bottom right-hand side to show you what the different colors mean. As parks continue, general fund, downtown, and streets. Drainage was basically all deleted because we don't have the money. Now, if we get grants for these, we'll take advantage of them. We're still pursuing those, and we got drainage money in our GO bonds also. Airport construction fund. Hotel Tax Fund, Special Grant Fund. Basically, the only thing in there is leftover ARPA money, and then the money that we pulled from CDBG for sidewalks. Street Maintenance Fund. Again, we're subsidizing this with bond money, so that's why it built up for a while. There's nothing planned in FY '28 because that's when we plan to issue our third tranche of GO bonds. Utility Fund. There's just a ton of projects in water and sewer. Again, you've had all weekend to look at these. I don't really have anything to say on these because I don't know enough. I'm not an engineer. Sanitation Fund. Again, I told you I was gonna breeze through these. I want you to have time for questions. The Bond Fund. Again, we're not looking to have our third and maybe final tranche this year, but maybe FY '28. So here's Proposition A, which is the airport. Proposition B, C, and D, which is fire, drainage, and cemetery. Proposition E, parks. Proposition F, street improvements, and Proposition G, sidewalks. So what's next? Again, we'll receive the certified roll July 25th, hopefully. By law, I need to inform the council of what the no new revenue rate and the voter approval rate will be. That will probably be by email. As soon as I get those numbers, I'll forward them to the city manager. He can forward them to council. August 18th is our next budget workshop. And then after the workshop, we're gonna ask council to vote not on the proposed tax rate, but on the maximum possible proposed tax rate, because we have to post notice in the papers. You can adopt anything under that rate. We're just gonna ask you to set the ceiling. September 1st, we'll have a public hearing on the budget, take action on the budget. Usually we delay approving the budget till after we have the public hearing on the tax rate, which will be September 15th. So September 15th is when we hope to basically approve the budget and the tax rate. Now your favorite part, questions.
I wanna go over something, Todd. Okay, every year I've asked this. Okay, you said ad valorem tax makes up 36% of our general fund.
Right?
Sales tax makes up 26%. Is that based on the 1 cent that we collect?
Yes.
Okay. All right. What would the tax rate be if we had both pennies of that sales tax?
So currently, I know you would ask this. So remember, every penny of the tax rate generates about $220,000 of revenue now. So if you divide the 9 million by the 220,000, that's gonna save 41 to 42 cents on your tax rate.
Okay, so say our tax rate now is what, 56?
57?
57? Okay, and if you had both pennies of the sales tax, it would reduce that by how many?
41 or 42
41.
cents.
So that would make your tax rate 16 cents per 100.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And you've answered the question. I think last year, 1 cent was around $200,000.
Yeah, our collection rate, remember a couple of years ago, for whatever reason, we were only collecting 95% of 95% of the levy.
Right.
It's normal to collect 98 to 99.5%.
Right.
Our collection rate turned around, so I don't know if their certified roll got better or what, but our collection rate, that's why it went from 200 to 220.
Yeah. Again, I'll compliment your department because you haven't been here that long, but we're still finding out that we're giving money away, i.e. to the county, okay? I.e. to a hospital district that receives 1 cent of our sales tax. It's a giveaway. I don't care how you look at it. I did notice one slide that you had there where I think it was like grants or there was one slide and it mentioned hospital district on the end. Do you remember that slide? Keep going a little bit further. Yeah, right there, i.e., okay, that asterisk said shared cost contracts with the county, i.e. outside city limit services, incident fees, and the hospital district. Okay. And again, I'm not gonna quit talking about this until, you know, this council or the hospital district or the county, you know, does something about it. Our hospital district, when this sale or lease is consummated, okay, will receive about $20.1 million in cash, i.e. from ad valorem tax, from sales tax, from the lease of the property, from the purchase of the inventory, from the purchase of supplies, from a few little nursing homes that they have. It just on the back of a piece of notebook paper, you can come up with about $20.1 million, and they owe us $600,000, you know, in ad valorem taxes, you know. $600,000, in which we've tried to collect, and matter of fact, we had them on a payment plan, and they just blew it off. And if you take $600,000 based on $220,000 equals a penny, that's almost 3 cents on the tax roll, you know. What I don't understand is why we give stuff away. We give it away. And it affects every single one of our employees. We can't increase their pay. We don't have funds to run our city. And, you know, I hope somebody will help me before I get off this council to where we can get something done about this, because I've said it the first year I was on here, this is not sustainable. In a business, it will not, it's not sustainable. If we keep going like we're going, and we give away what we give away, we're not gonna be able to offer the services that we offer to the city now, plus we're not gonna be able to pay them what they need to be paid. That's my speech.
Question on, can you go back to the property tax revenue? It's on 7. So I know that we've seen a net taxable value decrease significant. What did you say? It was
119 million.
And I know 50 million of that is from the extra exemptions. Do we expect there to be that variance to come down when we get our certified values?
I would think so. Normally, your preliminary values are lower compared to your certified values. And I think a lot of that's because they start working through all those protests of properties being contested.
So I may just not know the process completely. When they go, when a property is protested, is that not included in the value?
No, it's included, but I forgot the exact rule. When a property's protested, they either go by whichever's lower. The CAD's value, the value it was last year, or the value that the customer is saying it should be based on they got sufficient evidence to back it up. So, like I said, it goes to the appraisal review board, and between those 3 values, they come up with what it's actually gonna be. But we're seeing the absolute lowest it's gonna be on the preliminary values.
So we're probably under on that. Okay,
Do we have any idea about exactly how many dollars are being protested? Do we have any gauge, the number or anything like that?
I could,
That was my question.
I could reach out to Jason at the CAD and see, but normally I don't get that number until I get the certified roll. He might have a preliminary number he can share with me, though.
Yeah, what I was gonna say earlier, until that July 25th, until then, when I said the 2 pennies are, one, we don't know if it's 2 or if we'd need it. And the answer may be a smaller answer, even if it is getting closer to, again, at the end of the day, the goal is to get probably as close to at least what our values were of revenue going into this year. That's what I would try to get to. If it's a smaller gap, again, there may not be a need, but then with that, then it also adjusts the calculation. So, again, that inverse relationship on tax rate.
What time does this meeting end?
It's up to the mayor, but I think 5:15.
5:15.
So we have, starting now, about 19 minutes to have a full discussion about the budget.
Yes.
Public, that's it? Until, then the next meetings will be to vote on things and, okay, well, I'll start my questions, but I had hoped for a little more time.
You
But-
can go see him whenever you want to, Kathleen.
This is, that is not a public, transparent discussion, visiting one-to-one. And I already have gone to visit him, and I don't see those items actually addressed in here. But correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the drainage dollars were pretty much eliminated over the future. It looks to me like our sustainability, our balanced budget is on the backs of our infrastructure.
No, I think, and I don't know if Case is here, this is also looking at the CIP where you're going from design into your bid year.
Case is right there.
So I do think that is something he can definitely clarify. What we're designing versus when we're going to bid some of those projects.
So last year, if you remember the CIP, the way the CIP looked last year, it essentially was, can you go to that screen? It was essentially, we had asked for future money for drainage.
Right.
Kind of the way it looks right there, just not in red. So red, if you'll see your legend down there, are things we just went ahead and eliminated this year because we didn't have a real good belief that we'd be able to fund that in the future from the general fund. We've got the bond funds that we're currently utilizing. We've got several projects that have already been bid and actually one tonight on your regular agenda for
I saw
award. But as far as general fund dollars for drainage, we really have focused more on just spending down the bond money on the drainage, but also trying to go after grant opportunities for drainage, almost exclusively on our CDBG type applications. And we've got several of those out right now with the TDA, and the GLO hopefully get funded. But on a different, on the special grants screen, Todd, if you could go to that real quick. It just
Wait,
kinda
but
highlights
Don't
where
go, stay on that one screen and tell me about Summerhill. Please tell me good news, and then you can switch over.
Okay, so Summerhill is actually in your packet.
I know it is.
For award.
Okay,
So hopefully,
for the design, we'll be able to get it, the drainage resolved.
designed and it's been bid for construction. So
Okay.
this is a construction contract for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
We've also got several others, for example, right here, these are generally the ones that we've identified that we're trying to get funding through outside sources for. The CPF money, the congressional appropriations, we've kind of tagged for Patricia LeVere. And we'll see if there's any money left over for anything else after that. And then, EJ Campbell and Stewart Sweet Gum and Railroad, which are actually bond projects. The Stewart and the Railroad, lines, those have been identified as possible, funding through, CDBG grant. And so hopefully offload some of the burden from the bond to do those
So look at it this way. The one thing to remember is you don't have utility funds. You don't have a dedicated drainage fund paid by other impact fees or something like that. Some cities have that. Now, we are doing some other things, including some other detention analysis and things even related to the landfill, as an example, which will have an even larger, once we do finish that analysis. You might even want to touch on that. Even along the part of the university corridor, it'll even have impacts on that front. But again, you don't have a dedicated fund for that. And you've had deferred maintenance for quite a long time, and historically not going after grant funds. And so we're also going after as many grant opportunities at the same time, and prosecute the CIP projects, the bond projects, all at the same time. So I wouldn't characterize it as that we're cutting one to then fund the other. You have a lot of need. You have a limited amount of resources to do it. You're going to need some outside help on that. Otherwise, you're going to have a really high tax rate. That would be your other option. And again, even including maybe going back for another bond, which we also want to avoid if we can go after grant funds to do that.
When you cut your revenue by a third, you don't have any money to do anything with, right? Or you just do the best you can?
Well, here's your larger issue is when you look at the CPI, and then you look at anything where you had deferred maintenance, let's say something you should have done 10 years ago. Anything pre-COVID, and you had CPI impacts and inflationary impacts, you've got inflation that hasn't existed in certain sub-areas or part of the supply chain, hasn't existed since the early 80s or the late 70s. I think some of y'all probably had houses in that time frame. And God forbid we end up getting closer to that. But, CPI is going up. So again, how much volume? And again, as Todd has mentioned, you could do it through a bond. You used to be able to raise taxes without having to go back to just address those items, but other cities will have drainage impact fees and other things like that where you actually build in, from new development, you actually build in drainage projects and you create a fund for that. But we don't charge that. We've never charged that.
Is CIP in the general fund?
There is CIP.
Drainages.
Is it in the general fund?
Well, there's some of it's coming from general fund, some of it's coming from bonds.
Right, okay. What I'm saying is, when you don't have 1 cent of your sales tax, all you can do is all you can do. That's 1/3 of your entire revenue right there. So if you had that other penny, do you think you could do more?
Can we talk about the budget here that's being presented?
I think we
and the
are
other
talking
issues?
about the budget. I think we're talking about the revenue side. But you go ahead, Kathleen, you've got the floor.
No, you have it.
No, go ahead, I'm
Give an answer.
done. I'm
But
just trying to make a
The-
point.
But if you look at what, you can toggle between this one and the other one, you've got the Patricia LeVere improvements, you've got a couple that are CDBG, the E.J. Campbell one, and again, you can fund them a variety of ways. We are pursuing opportunities right now on grants on all fronts, which we're not. And then if you look historically, even on congressional requests, city didn't have a great track record and actually didn't have great representation back in the day with one of the prior congressional reps that just didn't want to go after any earmarks whatsoever, if y'all probably remember those days. So again, you can slice it as many ways as you want. If you wanted us to pivot and do it a different way, or prioritize different things, by all means, let us know. And with that, y'all may have some suggestions that we may have an answer on some things too, just in terms of timing, or do we even have the capacity to get to some things sooner than later that we might be able to pick up either through grants or would make more sense after we're completed with other CIP or bond-funded projects that are definitely of a large scale.
Okay, Kathleen, go ahead. What's your next question?
I'll let other people talk for just a second. It's all right. I don't mean to take the whole floor.
Anybody else?
But
have any questions?
I will ask this question. I don't know, you had talked about restructuring staffing. I don't see any staffing restructuring, or
No,
you talked about
haven't.
adding another staff person?
No,
or-
we're, the only people we're adding are the 3 patrolmen. Those are those only new adds in terms of funded in this budget.
Well, I would suggest that one of our priorities and challenges is our infrastructure. And it makes me uncomfortable to be clearing out those and hoping. I love the fact that we get grants. I love the fact that we utilize our bonds, but I think the bonds were intended for drainage to be in addition to the kinds of things we're already doing, not to replace them. So it really gives me pause that we're not securing dollars for infrastructure.
Well-
And the big difference, as Todd has already said, between the December proposal, where we were really in a hole and we couldn't meet our needs, just, 2 years or 3 years down, is taking out those
Well,
projects.
let me say this, there were a lot of
That's just
things,
the first.
let me say this, there were a lot of things that were not vetted, that were in the CIP in the out years, that we couldn't even tell you what some of those costs would be because where'd the case go? Because they were not fully vetted. They weren't, I mean, until you get into preliminary design, you don't even know what some of those things are gonna cost. And if you're looking at bond funds versus general funds, it's both coming from general fund. And that's the other thing y'all need to remember. At the end of the day, that is hitting the total tax rate. So we can split it a different way. We can add other things in, but we are not adding more staff in other areas, only on the first response side. Could Case probably add more people to help move things more? I mean, again, if you add more projects, you only have so much volume. And I think that that's also something to remember. But at the end of the day, it's coming out of the general fund, whether it's bond funds, and it adds to the tax rate, and you sell another tranche. Now, and let me not pick on the airport, but let me pick on the airport. We're recommending either through the Type B, probably through the Type B, a airport business plan. We haven't sold that last tranche. We have, is that another 4 or 5 cents that we still have?
Yeah, if we issued a full remainder, it'd
Yeah.
probably be another 4 or 5 cents.
And we have, and with that, we're actually running ahead in terms of match to the good. We're also looking at partnering with the philanthropic side out at the airport on matching a couple of projects. I'm not saying, I do think that once we finish the business plan, y'all also might have a decision to make. Do you go back to the voters on part of that? Do you go back and try to reaffirm? Do you need all of it? Do you need to sell all of it? Do you need to sell half of it? Are you getting part of that matched from the philanthropic side and from the other grants we've already have? And look at that in the context of the larger tax rate. But at the end of the day, we are looking at what the total tax rate impact is and how the citizens have to carry that. So again, if you're going to do more capital projects, you're going to need people to do them. And in case you got anything to add, I mean, I know you.
Could you go back to the drainage one more time? I just want to point out just for clarification, those drainage projects were not ever funded.
Yes.
Those were all in future years. We put that category in last year without anything being funded. Those were just trying to put it on the radar for funding in the future, so nothing was actually cut on this right here for anything else. It was just basically, we took this category out and said, we're not gonna try to fund this stuff with general fund in the future like we were originally thinking, because we're gonna try to just go after grant funds. And so there wasn't anything that was actually funded that's then been taken away on the drainage side.
Well, I mean, that's kind of splitting hairs. They need to be funded, so.
But again, until you've.
They're desperate.
And we have so many, you've had such a long period of time of deferred maintenance on drainage and things. Everything is going to cost more. These were not, again, fully fleshed out, ready to bid, correct? Where'd he go again?
Well, they're fully necessary,
Well, again,
wherever they are in the.
again, in terms of prioritization, I don't think you could argue that any one of them is immediately as known to be necessary or not. And, oh, there he is. With the plates in my neck, I really can't turn my head that far. But I'll let Mike speak to it from.
One point of clarification to add to what Case was saying, and possibly to answer your question. Much like the street maintenance fund and our street projects, we know that there's likely more projects that need attention than we can currently fund. We're projecting dollars out. We've identified some specific projects like Summer Hill, like Patricia Lavere, that we now have grant funding for, hence needing to take that out of the general fund in terms of our CIP plan. The general annual amount at $1 million that you see in future years, we've taken that out because we want to take a different approach to funding these drainage projects. Currently, we have plans with 2 pending applications, one with TDA, the Texas Department of Agriculture, and one with General Land Office, about $1.7 million pending an application. But we have a plan to use that, and we're competitive to potentially receive that funding. Our approach going forward will lean very heavily on outside funding, but it doesn't mean that we couldn't come back and identify potential sources under the general fund or some other ways to fund drainage. We just know that we need to be creative and think a little more critically about how drainage projects are funded. We're doing that. You're seeing that sort of in red. It looks like a more bold statement than it probably is. But the projects we have planned thus far are in the process of design. We have funding for those. Any projects we identify in the future, potentially under a drainage study we're seeking General Land Office funds for, we'll have to reassess how we fund those projects.
Okay, any other questions?
I would just say, if we feel like questions haven't adequately been answered, why don't we just add on an agenda item to discuss this at the end of our next council meeting? And we can talk to our heart's content and ask any questions we have. Is there any problem with that?
No, and you know, the part that Mike spoke to, and I alluded to it a little bit too, is until you do those upfront studies, you don't even know what your actual costs are on those in those out years. And so some of these were like, hey, we need to do something, but what the something is and then how we're going to pay for it. And that's the other piece. If you, as y'all probably know, at this point, we're in a stream, whether it's CDBG, GLO, TxDOT funds that were never tapped in the past. And with that, you typically, if you complete one of those initial studies, then you usually have a lot more leverage because it's done under their umbrella to then request implementation funds. And I think that also needs to be thought of that. Rather, again, our approach is not to overburden the tax rate in the general fund. That is not our intent. The conundrum we have this year is even with growth, even with new people moving here and all the above, you have a contraction of your CAD value. And we have to look at the revenue side too.
Well,
Do you want to, do you want to wait until after he gets his certified role?
Well, and if we need to have a special meeting to do it, or do it the first meeting in August where we actually have a clearer picture of what the revenue side is, I don't have any problem with that. And, I mean, we can all ask questions in the interim and have those questions answered at a future council meeting where it's done in the public.
Or do you want to do another workshop?
I'm open to
You
whatever
do a
council
workshop
wants to do.
prior to a council meeting,
Yeah.
whatever's easier.
That does put us at a hard stop before the meeting. Is there a reason not to include it just in a regular agenda for even a special meeting to do it? That way we don't back up against this sort of hard
I
timeline.
guess the question is, do you want a 15-minute break in there?
Right, we can have a special, I can call a special meeting and just, you can discuss all you want to. You can
I'd
start.
rather do it after the council meeting, because there's all kinds of travel things, and, I mean, and well, we're already meeting, just go ahead and keep meeting. I had a,
Well, if you had a special meeting, you would have all the time you needed, you know.
call it during the on a regular council day.
Pardon me?
Call it on a regular council day then.
No, I would just call a special meeting just for that.
Yeah, but on a regular council day would be a good time.
It wouldn't have to be on a regular council day.
Anyway. I had a couple of other ones. Did you?
Well, go ahead, Kathleen, because we can go right up to 5:25 as far as I'm concerned.
I'm wondering about ways to increase revenue through partnerships, and possibly bringing in more tourism. I know one of the things is to use our facilities, to make best use out of our facilities, and I'm thinking of even our historic sites, how to make them bring in more tourism.
The hotel motel study is addressing that. That is, it's going to look at, is there demand for another downtown boutique hotel? And is there demand, and when that demand would be, it would look at shoulder months. It's going to look at, could you have concerts? At one time, everybody that was anybody in the 70s and 80s, 90s played here.
Will it look at operating hours, and will it look at content and people's participation in choosing?
Well, what this is really going to look at, though, this would be done by the firms that do these type of analysis that are usually the precursors to getting back on, let's say, kind of a concert line or tour. At one time, back when it was, the Summit was in Houston, just about everybody that played the Summit also played here. I'm sure y'all probably saw most of them at different times in the 70s and 80s. So it'll look if that, and then also, are you competing against yourself? Are you competing against Bonita Creek? Are you competing against something else that's proximate, like I think there's a Jimmy Buffett concert venue or something over in Shreveport?
That's really not
Well,
what the
but-
question was.
Well, but again, it goes back to, do you have the capacity and the attraction, such as concerts, to bring more people when you have hotel capacity? Tourism, that's exactly why we're able to fund it with hotel motel funds. Because at the end of the day, heads in beds and visitation and what those residual impacts might be, or is there any? Now, I know the historic sites can be argued something else, but it's a lot easier to also sell those historic sites or anything else, or even if retailers are open on Sundays, if we can also build in a schedule where we're trying to bring people to town when we have the capacity to entertain them and have them spend, hopefully, not one night, but maybe 2 or 3 nights. So they would be interrelated.
So I have multiple requests a week to have our historic sites, some of them at least, have some rotating schedule, whatever, something open on Sunday.
And
Multiple, every week.
and I've
including from people who volunteer at the CVB. They say, why can we not look at this, different staffing patterns, something?
well,
And
I've
that
asked
brings in
Ashley.
income and you lose it.
I've asked Ashley separately to look at the cell phone data. And
Look at
that
the what?
We
Cell
collect
phone
cell
data.
phone data through, she can remind me, I'm getting too old to remember everything. Is Ashley here?
She's here.
Yes. So I had asked her some time ago to start looking at that cell phone data and see, because it wouldn't just be the historic sites. My humble opinion, it needs to be a team approach. If there's more people showing up on certain days looking for something to do, that is an opportunity for everybody. Because if you leave out the possibility of going to a restaurant, or you leave out the possibility of doing a few other things, you might just come and see that historic site one time and leave town, versus you might spend the whole afternoon here. And so she can touch on this right now.
So we have run historical data on all of our historic sites within the city as well as Miller's Crossing, and the visitor center, which is within the city. And Kathleen, I know your argument has been for Sunday, and I do believe that's a strong case. If it were up to me, I would hope that every historic site would be open every day of the week, because that is a real problem for us. Sunday through Wednesday, or Sunday through Tuesday, is extremely
And the other thing I had a thought on that. I think that the downtown, the Main Street Committee, I mean, I think everybody needs to we probably need to have a separate discussion with Main Street as well, maybe with the chamber. I think we probably need to come together to look at this so there can at least be, I mean, how many times have y'all all visited other places, you know, in Texas or something, and you happen to get there at, 4 o'clock on a Sunday?
Or even 4 o'clock on a Saturday right now.
Yeah, well, it depends on what town, yeah.
Yeah,
And,
if we don't have
and then,
anything,
you know,
It's crickets.
everything starts rolling up but I do think that we probably need a more comprehensive approach. Could we get others to jump in? I know we've also have a couple of, even restaurants that recently have even said, you know, I'm having labor issues. I'm not making any money on Monday. And I can think of a few even downtown that have said, okay, I might, when school's back in, I may have some more labor, but until school's back in, I've got a little bit of a challenge. It doesn't make sense even opening up. So those are some of the things we need to talk through with the business side too, so we can have it needs to be the full Nacogdoches experience and not, okay, we'll come back for a restaurant one day and then we'll go to historic site another day. Again, I would hope that we would want them to come back for the full experience every time.
So I think as I understand it, you are going to study this and you're going to bring people together to analyze this. Is that correct? Or to keep somebody here that extra night on Saturdays? Or
That we've
I
already.
just didn't see it reflected anywhere in the budget that we might
wouldn't know
need
what to
coop
reflect. We
dollars.
wouldn't know what to reflect. It's kind of like the hotel motel study. I wouldn't come in and say, okay, we need to go to a next phase to spend X on a mini Woodlands pavilion, at least a schematic design or something to put out in an RFI for naming rights for someone to fund it, so they know what they're funding. Because until we do the study, we couldn't size it, we couldn't scope it, wouldn't have an idea what it is,
But you will do it. We'll
We
do
are
this
working on it.
together.
Just keeping in mind that historic sites is managed under community services and our budgets are completely separate.
Correct.
I do know that Veronica and Jessica have been in discussions with us to be open an additional day each week.
I'm not saying an additional day. I'm not, because that's what happens is, oh, if we do this, it's just going to cost too much. I'm talking about changing schedules, doing something that's what I've always been talking about, so I just want to clarify that.
I can definitely organize a meeting where we talk about,
Thank you.
staggering schedule.
Yeah, or whatever. Even brainstorming with people who are working this would be important. A couple of other things, I'll keep them to myself right now.
Okay, that's it. We'll start back at 5:30. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.